So good morning. Today is the first day of Adar, and it's also the 22nd of February. Since it's Adar, we'll also at the end hopefully add something to what we're learning about that is connected to the month and to the whole idea of joy. So let's start. The fourth reading of Terumah is usually regarded as boring, one might say. It has a lot to do with the planks that made up the courtyard of the Tabernacle, and it doesn't seem to be very interesting. The part that's usually discussed is what we call the bases. The bases were made out of the silver that was given as a half shekel, half of an amount of silver that was given by each person in the census, and this was also related to the repentance, the penitence that the Jewish people gave after the sin of the golden calf. And the idea that is brought in that respect is that these bases, which held the planks up, if you look in the Chumash that we're usually learning from, which is the Moshe Vishnevsky's Chumash, so you see it here quite clearly. Each of the planks had these pieces of it coming out, and they would go into the bases, and that's actually what held it up. So you can see that on page 196 if you like. And the idea that he brings here from the Rebbe is that these bases were made from the half shekel that each person gave equivalently. Every single person gave a half shekel. So that silver went into these bases. The idea is that what holds up the whole edifice, what holds up all of Yiddishkeit in a person's life, is really what is the same as everyone else. It's true that we're seeking to get to the higher, more individualized sense of serving God, each person with his talents, with his abilities, with his feelings, with his mindset, and so on. But the basis is equal to everyone. And what does it mean that the basis is equal to everyone? We all have in common halakha. And halakha is the basis, the legal part that sort of regulates life, and everybody keeps it the same way. And the idea is that I don't need to be special there. The base is made out of silver that was given by everyone equally, the same way. And it's what happens afterwards that's interesting. But let's continue that's the usual explanation. Let's continue this. If the base is my actions, the very basis of life, like how I regulate my actions, and that I'm sure to act the same way every day. I have this routine that holds me together, and without that routine I really would be scatterbrained, and I would be all over the place. I wouldn't be able to move forward in life. That's the first thing that people understand when they mature, is that I have to hold together some routine. It could be that my routine is good enough that I'm doing things routinely throughout the day, and then all my day is structured, and it could be that only a small part of my day is structured. But something has to hold it together. And that something is, the earlier that you get used to some routine, the more you can achieve in life. And that's a very easy basis. I think everybody who's over the age of probably today 25, 30 knows that, and they strive to achieve that. But above that, above the actions, now we have the rest of the person. And so if the bases are the routine, then the rest of the plank, which is 10 cubits high, represents the full person. And there's a very interesting thing. This is how the Baal Shem Tov taught this, that the planks represent the human being. The planks themselves. So the bottom part, like we just said, is the actions, is the routine that needs to repeat. What about as you go higher up? How does it work there? So there's a very interesting verse at the end of this week's of today's reading. And he says like this: "V'akemota et hamishkan kemishpato asher hore'eta bahar." You shall erect the tabernacle in its proper order, as you will have been shown by me on the mountain. Now, on the face of it, it's a very simple verse. All it's saying is, follow my instructions when you're building the tabernacle. But the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, learns from this a very important halacha, and the Baal Shem Tov builds on this. They say like this: Et hamishkan kemishpato, the order of the Mishkan, the order of the tabernacle. But we were just talking about the planks. Is there really an order to the planks? What are you saying? I have altogether 48 planks. Is there an order to them? Is there a particular order that you need to follow, that you have to keep? It doesn't seem to be, because but if you're saying that there's an order to the tabernacle, says the Jerusalem Talmud, from this we learn that there was exactly that. Each plank had its designated place, and you couldn't just replace them one with another. You couldn't exchange them. So what is this saying? First of all, it's saying that every person has a particular place in the world. This is called, by the sages, this is called that no one is burnt by the canopy of his friend. What does that mean? That if something belongs to me, and if I have a rightful place in the world, there's two things. One is that nobody can take it away from me, but it's still considered to be a good deed to look at other people and to see what they belong to and not to take that away from them. What's an example? An example is that there's a particular person who makes soup every Monday and Thursday. And that's his special mitzvah. What does he do? Why does he do that? Because that brings people to shul. It brings people, it gives them extra motivation to come on Mondays and Thursdays. Now somebody can see that and say, I want to do that. Look at how popular he is because of the great soup that he makes. So I want to come and do that. So we come and say to him, every person has his place in the whole structure. And you have to respect it. That thing that he does, first of all, it took him time to figure it out. But even without that, now that he's entrusted with that, then you shouldn't trespass on what belongs to someone else. And that's actually halacha. Halacha in the Jerusalem Talmud, you should keep it that way. But the Baal Shem Tov takes it into the spiritual level. Based on this Yerushalmi, on this passage in the Jerusalem Talmud, by the way, it's in Shabbos in chapter 12, the third halacha. In the Jerusalem Talmud, it's divided a little bit differently than it is in the Babylonian Talmud. The Baal Shem Tov says that really everything that you connect to in the world, and I'll explain in a moment why he takes this from here, you need to find the root of the connection. Now let me explain what he means here. In the Jerusalem Talmud, it says, how did they know which plank went where? So he says, on each plank, they wrote a letter. They wrote a letter on one side, where the plank on the, let's call it the right side of the plank, it had a letter here. The plank next to it had a matching letter. And then the right side of the next plank had a different letter, and so on. And by the way, people use this today because they want to have some memory of it when they build a sukkah. So the sukkah is made out of boards, separate boards, and you put them together in some way. So a lot of people make marks on the boards so that every year they build the sukkah in exactly the same order. There's another thing that we do that same way, front and back, with the tzitzis. With the talis, it's not so difficult because we have on the back where we put our head, there's usually some kind of special, either an addition or it's silky, or it's easy to tell. But on the tzitzis that we wear on our body, it's not so easy to tell because a lot of times they're exactly the same, back and front and back. So there's a lot of people that put a mark to know which was the front and which was the back, and always wear it the same way. It's like to put order into your life. So says the Baal Shem Tov, if you are already connected with someone, in a certain sense, you have a mark on you, and they have a mark that matches them. And once you've connected with someone, look at the relationship as coming from God. What does that help? That you now think that this is not by some kind of mistake. It's not just by chance. And I want to tell you a little story that happened to me last summer. Was it last summer? I guess it was last summer in Austria. And it was actually 2 summers ago, I think. And on the last day of our family trip, we were driving to the airport, and everything was fine for a whole week, and then we're like 5 minutes from the airport on our way back to Israel, and I stopped at what I thought was a red light, but as it turned out, it was like a blinking red light, which really meant just yield or something like that. I've never seen anything like this. I don't know what it means. And I really didn't understand what was going on, and I hit the brake and I stopped. And there was a car behind me, and he rear-ended me. Now these are Germans. They don't know from anything. Like, if you had an accident, okay, so the whole world, they have to invite the police and this and that. It turns out the guy in the car was an immigrant from India. And he was really, really upset because it wasn't his car, and he thought that, oh no, and I said to him, well, you're the one who's to blame, and what can we do? No, I have to invite the police, you can't go, it's this and that. At some point, I saw that he had some kind of picture of one of his idols on his cell phone. And I said to him, nothing happened. The only reason that we had to stop our cars was because God wanted us to meet. That's all. He just wanted us to form a connection. And we don't know what it's good for, but nothing happened, and you see that nothing happened. So there must be a different reason. And the reason is that we are meant to know each other, to get to know each other. So we talked for a few minutes, and his whole face changed. And suddenly he felt, there's meaning to this. It didn't just happen for nothing. Really, nothing happened. But he couldn't get himself out of that position. And the moment I added this simple idea from the Baal Shem Tov, that if I meet someone, there's a reason, there's a godly reason for it, it changes the whole situation. It changes the whole meaning of what's going on. And indeed, we parted, we hugged, and everything was fine. Never heard from him again. Everything was very nice. We got to the airport on time. We made it to our flight. And that's the simple idea of keresh, because keresh, the word for plank in Hebrew, has the same letters as kesher. Kesher means connection. The point of every human being in the world is to create connections. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe took this to a whole new level. He said, why is Chabad so successful? The reason Chabad is so successful because the Rebbe taught that the real reason that we're here is to connect to other people. Everything else is secondary. And if you do that, if you respect the place that people have, and you invite them to join you, and you connect to them, and you keep that connection forever, you never change those 2 letters. There's something that he told Rav Ginsburg once, which is anyone that you've ever had a connection with, you should always make every effort to keep that connection alive. Don't lose connections. It's very interesting. One small last anecdote. In 2 weeks, I'll be traveling to the United States, and we're going to be going through London. In London right now, the Israeli ambassador is a very nice woman, a little younger than me. Her name is Tzipi Chotubeli. She's a Bukharian Jew. And she's in the Likud party here, and she's a good friend of Bibi's, and he made her the ambassador about 4 years ago or 3 years ago. When an ambassador comes to a new country, they have to go present their documents and receive the acceptance from the local authorities. In the case of London, that was Queen Elizabeth at the time. And she asked everyone she knew, we have an opportunity to spend 20 minutes with her. What do you think we should ask? What should we talk about? She opened this up on her Facebook page. And the answer, I don't know if Rabbi Menusi is there right now, he said to them, to her and her husband, to Tzipi and to her husband, the ambassador and her husband, ask the queen, what is your advice for life? From your experience, what is the most important thing you've learned? She was already 92 or something like that. And they asked her that question. And her answer was, preserve the connections you've made. It's very interesting. She said exactly the same thing. If you've made a connection already, keep it alive, continue the connection, and so on. So we won't have time today for the joy, for the simcha of Adar. We'll just say it in one sentence, that the way to add joy is to give thanks. Without explaining it, the more thanks a person gives during the day to God, to those around him, and so on, the more joy there is in life. Have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow, God willing.
Thank you, Rabbi.